is what is ideology? So it's the second half of the course is all about political ideologies, and we're going to be discussing lots of different political ideologies. So in order to properly understand these different political ideologies, we need to know what ideology is in general. So in this presentation, we'll discuss a variety of questions. What ideologies are, why the concept of ideology is being criticized. We'll look at what left-wing and right-wing mean. So left-wing and right-wing are certain terms that we use to describe politics and to describe people's political opinions. We'll learn what they mean today. We'll learn how do we analyze political ideologies. So one possible way to do it is through what we call the comparative method. We can analyze political ideologies by comparing them against other political ideologies, to decide what they mean. We'll learn some important terms like radical and moderate. These are often used political terms. And we need to know, well, what do they actually mean? And then in particular, these are terms that students get the meaning of wrong a lot because of the way these terms are used in the media and stuff like that. So I'm going to clarify the terms for you a little bit. And lastly, we'll look at the relationship between facts and ideology again. I sort of alluded to it earlier in the semester, right? So what is the relationship between facts and ideology? In particular, how do ideologies enable us to evaluate certain facts and decide their relationship with each other? So, to start with, an ideology is a system of beliefs that decides and affects the way that we understand the world around us. One way of looking at ideology is to say that it's our most closely held values and feelings. If I ask you what you think about anything, and I ask you why, okay, there's a car that's speeding towards, a person and a cat. Who do you save, the person or the cat? Right? Now let's say you say the person, and I'll ask, okay, why did you save the person? Good job, but why did you save the person and not the cat? You let the cat die. Why? Right? And you might say, well, because I believe that human lives are more valuable than cat lives, right? It was more important to save the person than the cat, right? This would be an ideological reason. It might not seem like one, but it is, right? This reflects an ideology we call humanism that basically says that humans are important in some way, more important than other non-human things, okay? Or for example, if we take the bus and we see there's the red seats on the bus that are reserved for the elderly, people with disabilities, what are the other categories? People with injuries and pregnant women, right? This is also based on an ideology, right? An ideology that says, well, we should make special effort to help people who have special needs. Now, not everybody believes this. For example, there's an alternative ideology which we call social Darwinism, which basically says, well, the strong should survive and the weak should perish, and that it's good for society to operate the same way that the natural world does, right? Now, if I was a social Darwinist, I'm not, but if I was a social Darwinist, I would not get up and give my seat to an elderly person or a sick person or something like that, because I would want them to not occupy public space, right? Sort of deny them that space so that the strong people can survive, right? So what we'll learn is that, there is not this universal agreement on certain things, on almost everything. That the facts of the world are not universal at all, and that our way of understanding certain facts is, to a large extent, determined by the beliefs that we hold. Beliefs like some people with special needs need special help. Beliefs like human life is important and human beings have rights. Beliefs like we own ourselves, or beliefs like the society should be more equal than what it is, right? Or beliefs like the opposite. Some people believe that talented people should keep the fruits of their talent, or that rich people deserve to be rich, or that traditions should be respected no matter what, even if they hurt people, right? We'll cover all of these different types of beliefs. For the rest of the semester, that's what we're focusing on. Now, ideologies inform everything that we see around us, and they help us understand everybody. When we make a judgment about another person, and whether we like them or not, ideology helps us decide whether we like a person or not. Let's say I'm a person who values hard work a lot. That forces me to think, well, when I look at another person, Are they hardworking or are they lazy? I'm judging them based on this principle. I'm saying, well, hard work is important, therefore I can divide every person in the world based on the level of effort that they use in certain things. There are hardworking people, there are lazy people. Let's say I decide intelligence is important, I can then divide everybody in the world based on that. There are some stupid people and there are some smart people, right? My ideology is helping me decide the whole way that I analyze the rest of the world. Right, so most important is the last point of this slide, which is that most people don't realize that they hold certain beliefs. Most of the beliefs that we have are not conscious beliefs. We just have them. We don't think about why. We don't try and reason why we believe what we do. We just believe certain things. Right, now, you're here studying in class, you're studying Introduction to Political Theory. One of the reasons you're doing that is to raise yourself up above the normal person. The normal person just believes stuff and doesn't know why, and in fact doesn't even know what they believe. Right? You're trying to think systematically about the things you believe and about the things that other people believe. And so to understand why they believe what they do, what is the relationship between certain beliefs and other beliefs? Right, so most people don't understand that they subscribe to ideologies, even when they do. Right? Everybody has an ideology, even those people who say that they don't. And that's the most important point that we should take away from this. Right, so ideology and ideological are also used in a negative way. You know, in contemporary politics, it's seen as bad to be driven by an ideology, which is of course a ridiculous position, right? Because if everybody's driven by an ideology, why is it bad to have an ideology, right? But it becomes very common that a leader in politics will criticize anybody else who disagrees with them, saying that, well, you're just being ideological, right? But every type of political thought is the result of a specific type of ideology. And ideologies are systems of ideas organized around certain goals. So firstly, the most important rule in politics is how do you get power? Because without power you can't do anything. Right? So ideologies usually involve an answer to this question. How do you get power? You know, is it by convincing people to follow you? Is it because you're going to be just so powerful you're just going to take power? How are you going to get power? Right? Then secondly, how do we maintain power? So once you've got power, how are you going to make sure that you stay in power so you can keep changing the society to be what you want it to be? And lastly, now that you've got power, the most important thing to decide is what are you actually going to do with it? You know, you've got state power, you have all of this machinery of government. You know, how are you going to use it? How are you going to shape the society to be what you want it to be? Are you going to make it more unequal? Are you going to make it more equal? You know, what are you going to do with power? So one of the key concepts that we use to understand differences between political ideologies, and one that you'll hear a lot if you listen to the media or read academic articles or commentary or that sort of thing, right? You'll see this discussion of left and right-wing politics. You know, some people are seen to be on the left wing and right wing. So what does it mean, and where do these terms come from? Well, the terms come from the French Revolution. If you don't know, the French Revolution was kind of an important event. Right? It was the first time that human beings moved beyond feudalism, which is the previous social system that we had, and moved towards a more democratic form of government where there were no longer kings and people ruling us for no reason. Right? That's a very blunt summary, but it's the best summary I can give you. Right? So before the French Revolution, there was a National Assembly, which was created by the king. Basically realized, oh crap, I'm in trouble, people hate me. How do I become less hated? Oh, I know, I'll pretend to listen to them, right? I'll create a National Assembly where people can talk and say what they want in politics, and I'll pretend to listen, and then they'll feel better, and maybe they won't try and kick me out of power, right? So in the National Assembly, if you were a supporter of the king, you would sit on the right of the speaker, right? So if you supported the current established power, you sat on the right. And if you were a supporter of the revolution, you sat on the left. If you were a supporter of the people, the common people, you sat on the left. Right? So from this old tradition, we get the concept of left-wing and right-wing politics. And broadly speaking, right-wing politics is the type of politics that supports hierarchy or inequality. Right? In the case of the French Revolution, the people who supported the king and supported the king staying in power, right? That's clearly supporting a hierarchy, saying the king is better than you, right? So left-wing politics is broadly that type of politics that supports social equality, so that people should be the same in some way. Right, now that seems simple and easy to understand, and of course my job is to destroy that simple understanding and make it more complicated. So the more complicated part about left and right-wing politics is that we also use the terms in a comparative way. Right? So, for example, we can say socialists, communists, and social democrats are all types of left-wing politics. You know, they are unhappy with the way society is currently, and they want to redistribute power and resources. They want to make the society more equal in some way. Right? But there are differences between these different ideologies as well. For example, communists eventually want a society that is completely equal, where everybody has the same access to the means of production, everybody has the same amount of wealth and that sort of thing. So social democrats want a society that is just slightly more fair than it currently is, you know, where nobody's poor but nobody's necessarily equal. That makes communists to the left of social democrats. They want a stronger form of equality than social democrats do. So even though they're both left-wing ideologies, communists are to the left of social democrats, and that's the comparative use of the term. Right, so when this becomes important is that even within one political party, there are often disagreements. You know, not everybody in a political party agrees with each other. There's debates and discussions, and different positions are held by different people. Right, so even in a single political party, when people disagree on certain issues, often there's a left and a right wing of a political party. So, you know, we might say the Nazi Party was a right-wing political party in Germany in, you know, from the 1930s or so until the end of the Second World War. But even within the Nazi Party, there were left and right-wing factions, you know, people who had differences of opinion based on this concept, based on how much equality they support or don't support. Okay? So, some political analysts have tried to go beyond this left-right distinction and say, well, there's other forms of differences that matter that aren't necessarily captured by this simple division between left and right-wing politics. For example, it's possible to strongly support economic equality, but oppose social equality. You know, maybe you believe socialism is great, but only for men and only for people who have the same racial background as you, right? That would mean that you're a strong supporter of economic equality, but not of social equality. How do we measure a person like that? You know, how do we tell the difference between a communist and that person? You know? So in a similar way, it's possible to strongly support economic inequality. You know, you could be a libertarian and say, well, it's okay if some people are rich and other people are poor, right? That's fine. But on a moral level, I'm going to treat everybody as equal, right? Men are equal than women. It doesn't matter what your sexuality is. People are equal, that sort of thing. Right? So libertarians tend to do this. They tend to say, well, economic differences are acceptable, are good, but social differences are not justified. You know, everybody should have the same rights as each other. Now, how do we capture these differences in this left-right distinction? Well, we can't really do it. We can't really do it. So what do? We follow something like this, you know, a Cartesian diagram where on the left to the right spectrum, we measure a person's commitment to economic equality, where left means economically equal and right means economically unequal. You know, and on the top to bottom we have authoritarian or libertarian. That spectrum captures the extent to which a person believes in social equality. So authoritarians obviously don't believe in social equality. They believe that one person or a limited group of people should make decisions for everybody else because, you know, they're better at making decisions in some way. Libertarians tend to believe that people should all have an equal right to make decisions, right? So if you'd like to see where you fit within this political spectrum, there's a really cool website which you should go to. It's a test, not the type of test you can fail, it's a subjective test. So go to Political Compass, it'll ask you a bunch of questions, you'll give a bunch of answers, and it will tell you where on the political spectrum you currently fit. You know, and why might that be important? Well, it will even suggest things that you can read. So ideas of people similar to yours, ideas of people different to yours, right? That will help you understand in a more systematic and scientific way why do I believe the things that I do? Why do I believe the things that I do? And give reasons for them. Right? This will turn you from the average person to a more politically conscious person, which is the whole point of doing this class. Right, so some of the terms that you'll hear that are more controversial is radical and moderate. And in the way that the average person uses these terms, there's an association between radicalism and political violence. And we think that if a person uses political violence, they're a radical. If they don't, they're a moderate. And this is simply not true. So I'm going to try and explain the actual meaning of radical and moderate. Now, a radical person is simply a person who wants a fundamental change in the way society works. So a person who's very unhappy with the way society is, wants it to change a lot, and as a result wants to change society to a great extent. So that does not mean that the person necessarily wants to achieve this change in a violent way. We'll study later in the semester, we'll study figures like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, who were radical thinkers, right? They wanted the society to be very different from what it was. Gandhi wanted the end of British imperialism, Martin Luther King wanted the end of segregation and the development of civil rights in the United States for African Americans. So they wanted a very different society from the one that they lived in. By that definition, they were radical thinkers, yet both opposed the use of political violence. Right? So there is no necessary association between radical political thought and political violence. In a similar way, being a moderate does not mean being a non-violent person. If you were in the United States in 2001, the average person supported the invasion of Afghanistan. Right? So to be a moderate in the United States in 2001 was to support war, was to support violence. Right? So to be a moderate does not necessarily mean being non-violent as well. You can be a moderate and support violence. You can be a radical and support non-violence. The two things have no relation to each other. So a moderate is a person whose political views are close to the middle, right? Close to what they are now, close to the average person in society, close to the average way that the world is currently. A person who might think, well, even if some change is a good thing, not too much change and not fundamental change is needed to make society better. Whereas a radical wants a lot of change. Now, what's even more confusing about this distinction is that somebody who was a radical can become a moderate. The perfect example of this is the Chinese Communist Party. When it was founded, it would be a radical organization. A group of people who were very unhappy with what China was at the time and wanted a very big amount of change. They were committed to transforming the society a lot. Whereas now, they're a moderate party. They don't want very much change from the current situation, right? So clearly, what was radical can become moderate. It's not a fixed thing, okay? So that brings up a really important piece of advice, which is you should use a lot of care when you're using political terms. When we're doing this political analysis and we're using terms that have very specific meanings, we need to be very careful about the terms that we're using. Right? One good example is that next week we're going to start studying liberalism. Liberalism is the first topic. Now, the word liberal can refer to lots of different things. Can refer to philosophical liberalism, which is what we're going to study, but it can also refer to different types of politics. In the United States, if you're a liberal, that can mean everything from an anarchist, a communist, a socialist, a social democrat, and even some specific types of liberals as well. Right? Anybody who's considered part of the left wing of politics is a liberal in the way that the United States uses the term. Right? Now, in Australia, where I'm from, if you're a liberal, that means you're part of the right wing, right? You're actually a conservative, or at least a libertarian. You're part of the right wing of Australian politics if you're a liberal. Now, the reason I choose that example is just to show, okay, if you say liberal, you've got to explain exactly what you mean. Are you referring to the Liberal Party in Australia? Are you referring to left-wing thought in the United States? Are you referring to philosophical liberalism, what we're going to study next week? Right? You can make it mean anything you want, but you've got to explain yourself. You've got to define the terms that you use. Alright, so when we analyze these political ideologies and distinguish between the terms that we use, we've got to say, well, sometimes there's an analytical meaning of these terms. Right? Liberalism can mean philosophical liberalism, the writings of certain different people who we're going to study. Right? It can be a system of thought based on individual rights and freedoms and that sort of thing. Right? Liberals can also mean the political meaning of the term. In other words, if you're in the US, a liberal is everybody who's not a conservative. You know, it's a political meaning. Right, so lastly, we'll look at the relationship between facts and ideology. And I'll restate what I argued at the start of semester. You know, if you want to debate this with me later, you can. But here is a proposition that I'll make that says, it's impossible to understand the world based on only facts. Okay, I'm debating with Deng Xiaoping, I suppose. You know, he says, seek truth from facts. I'm saying, no, you can't. You need some sort of value base, right? Because values enable you to do certain things. In particular, they enable us to evaluate relationships that exist between facts. Okay? Let's say in front of me there is a poor person, and I'm trying to understand, okay, why are they poor? Now, there are lots of explanations for why that person might be poor. Some people will say that person is lazy. Some people will say that person is naturally hopeless and unintelligent and untalented. Some people will say rich people are just mean and don't give them any money. Right? The society is not very nice. Some people will say capitalism did not give that person a job. Right? That person, or didn't give that person enough money. Right? Capitalism exploited that person. You know, there's 5 or 4 types of explanations for why the person is poor. Which one is correct? Well, it's determined by the values that we hold, right? You know, if we're a supporter of the current economic system, we're more likely to say that person is poor, not because of capitalism, but instead because they're stupid or dumb or lazy or something like that, right? Whereas if we don't like the current economic system, if we're a socialist, we're more likely to say it's capitalism's fault, right? That person could have more money if only we had an economic or political system to give them more money. Right, so in other words, facts and ideology are related in an intimate way. The only way we can decide why things happen the way they do and what we should do about them is to actually believe something, right? Believe something about why things happen, right? That facts, ideology helps us decide what is politically important. You know, if I asked you the question right now, what is the most important thing the government should fix? You would have to give a specific answer, okay? Let's say you said the environment, okay? The environment is destroyed, we're going to have global warming and all that sort of thing, right? If you say the environment is the most important thing, you're making a value statement. You're saying that fixing the environment is more important than all the other problems. So there's lots of other problems, you know, some people get sick and die, some people can't afford to go to hospital, some people don't have education, some people live very poorly in the world. You know, they don't have very much to eat, they don't have very much resources, right? If you're saying the environment is the most important problem, what you're really saying is that it's more important than all of the other associated problems. You're giving it priority. And the only way that you can do that is to believe that it's more important. Right? You've got to have a value that says that's more important. There is no objective, fact-driven reason why the environment is more important than other problems. Right? We have to construct a logical argument for why, based on certain beliefs. And we have to convince people to believe the same thing as us. That's kind of the point. Right? So ideologies also help us understand the relationships between these important things, and also what we should do about them. Now, if we return to the poor person and we ask why they're poor, now if we think they're poor because they're lazy, what should government do about that? Well, it should probably force them to work in some way, right? Punish them or create incentives so that they work, so that they're not lazy. If we think that they're poor because they're not educated, of course we'd focus on giving them education in some way. If we think they're poor because capitalism is a bad economic system, right, then we want to intervene into that economic system somehow, give them a job or give them unemployment insurance or change the economic system, right? Depending on what we believe about why they're poor, that then determines what we should do about their poverty. It determines how we would want to respond to that problem, you know? So Lastly, ideology also determines what our overall political goals are. So what do we actually want to do with power if we had power? How would we change the society? Or is our goal to just keep society the way it is now and defend it from change? Now we'll look at conservatism as well. It's basically what conservative is. It's an argument that society is fine, there's nothing wrong with it, it should be defended against people who want to change it. Okay? So what are our goals and what are the means that we can use to achieve our goals? Right? So how are we going to get what we want? You know, is it convincing other people, or do we build ourselves into a powerful political party or organization, or do we need to take power? How are we going to take power? You know, if I'm the Communist Party in the 1920s, I'm thinking, well, how are we going to take power? We're currently 20 people in a room. You know, that's how the Communist Party started. It's a reading group of 20 people. How are we going to take power? You know, we have to convince a few people, we have to get some weapons, we have to, you know, overthrow the nationalist government, stuff like that, right? So the question of the means we're prepared to use to take power, you know, are we prepared to use violence, that sort of thing, right, is part of ideology. And we can only know that based on what we believe about the rest of the world. There is no fact that can tell us that the use of violence is objectively better or worse, right? It's completely belief driven. Right, so in summary, today we've learned that ideologies are systems of belief involving our basic values, right? And these have an impact on everything that we see around us. You know, the friends that we make, the judgments that we make about other people, the behaviors that we demonstrate, everything is informed by some kind of ideology, right? The things that you like and dislike. When we analyze ideologies, we've learned that we can relate them together, we can compare them together, and that's probably the best way to do it, is to compare different ideologies to each other, right? Because then it makes it obvious that X believes one thing and that Y believes the opposite thing, right? Socialists want an equal society in the end, right? Libertarians do not want an equal society in terms of property. That's, by comparing them together, we better understand what both believes. Okay, so we use a comparative term like left and right to make this analysis, you know, which is a solid reason that I say, well, don't start writing your essay yet, right? Listen to some of the different ideologies first, and then start writing, because then you can make a comparison better. You know more about different ideologies then. Right? So wait a few weeks and listen. Okay, we use these terms also to evaluate different positions within ideologies. You know, so for example, next week we're going to learn that liberalism is not one single belief. There's lots of big debates within liberalism about what's correct, right? And we can talk about a left wing of liberalism and a right wing of liberalism as well. You know, socialism is also the case, right? We can talk about the left wing of socialism and the right wing of socialism as well. So within ideologies, we can use terms like left and right wing to identify different positions. Right, and lastly, ideologies are not separate from facts. In fact, ideologies are the very way that we decide what facts are important, what facts are relevant, and what the relationship between these facts is, right? And what we should do about these facts. You know, like, okay, maybe we just think poverty is not important at all. You know, like there's some drug companies in the world that say, well, when we make drugs, we make them for rich people who can afford them, right? Not for poor people who need the medicine. Okay? Now that's clearly an ideological statement. You know, the drugs can treat everybody equally, but these drugs are being manufactured for profit. That's an ideological statement. You know? So we're looking at a few things. You know, what facts are relevant, what facts are important, what the relationship is, and what we should do about them. To answer any of those questions, we need an ideology. We need to believe something about the world, right? And everybody does, whether you admit it or not. Everybody believes something about the world every day. Otherwise it would be impossible to wake up and exist in the world, right? Everybody believes something about everybody else, right? So I hope that sort of explains what ideologies are. And next week we'll look at liberalism. It'll be the first ideology that we study. So I suggest if you want to come prepared, study the notes on liberalism. All right, so now we have some time to look at the exams.